All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining me. We'll go ahead and start here. If you have questions, go ahead and post them. Should be below the video if you're on a smaller screen, to the right of the video if you are on a larger screen. All right, let's see what we got here. So we'll start here with Brian H. says, I've seen so many videos about shaft lean. I'm not sure which that shaft lean is desirable if you have a slow swing speed. Mine is max 80 miles per hour with driver. Am I right in thinking that shaft lean is less desirable at slower swing speeds since the ball comes out lower, won't hold greens, and lands quicker? In my opinion, you can have you have to be a little bit careful with shaft lean if you have lower club head speed. A lot of it depends on like the conditions that you play in. But you want shaft lean no matter what, um, to a certain extent, right? Straighten out the camera here. So even if you have slow club head speed, you still want to have some shaft lean. Now you can be excessive with it, even if you have a lot of club head speed. You can be excessive with it, right? So that's really the main thing you have to keep in mind. You have to find that happy medium that gives you kind of playable. But nobody under any circumstances really should be coming into contact like this, right? This, from a physical standpoint, is going to be very, very difficult to make good contact with the ball. You're going to tend to chunk and thin it, right? Because if you think about how the club is coming down on an arc, right? So if I'm coming down and this club is like this, that means that the bottom of my arc is going to occur before the golf ball. And that can only really work if you're hitting the ball off of a tee, like it's elevated off of a tee. That can work with the driver. But for shots that are hit off the ground, which most of your shots are going to be hit directly off the ground, we need the bottom of that arc to be ahead of the ball. And in order for that to happen, you have to have some shaft length, right? So to be consistent, even let's say you're an 80 mile per hour club head speed player, if you look like this at impact, I would say you're in pretty good shape, right? Now, that being said, again, it can depend on the kind of golf courses you play, right? Because if you get more shaft length, you will hit it farther depending on your conditions. So if you play in kind of um, firm conditions, then with like tight fairways and stuff like that, you will probably have a benefit of having shaft lean because you'll hit the ball overall farther. Now it won't get up in the air a ton, but it'll run out, right? And you'll hit the ball farther. So, I would try to be able to do both, try to be able to hit it high when you need to and low when you need to. Um, that would be, I would try to develop both, but you're exactly right. If you are not a high club head speed player, and let's say you're playing in conditions where you've got to carry the ball to a certain point. Now the ball won't go as far overall distance wise, but it will be more playable most likely if you get the ball up in the air a little bit. So and that would be by adding a little bit of loss. So that's why I try to implore most golfers to try to gain some club head speed. Most players can gain some club head speed if they just work on it a little bit. So and that can just benefit your game in a lot of ways. We have people come to our distance clinics. I'll tell you the average age of somebody that comes to a distance clinic is like 65-ish, something like that. We've had anywhere from people in their 20s to people in their 80s come to the distance clinics, but the average is more on the higher end, right? Usually we'll have like one guy in his 50s or something like that. And everybody else will be 60s and 70s, and then maybe like one or two 80 year old people. That's usually everybody that comes to a distance clinic, and all these people gain club head speed, right? So, and it's just a matter of 2 days, of working on it. So, I've never seen anybody that can't improve or can't gain any club head speed. So, if you work on it a little bit, you certainly can. And if you're looking to gain club head speed, what I'd recommend doing is working through our 20-minute distance fix. That's really the course that's really going to help you to work through it. I know there's other programs out there, and they are good, but there's nothing that's been as effective as the 20-minute distance fix from what I've seen. So that's what I'd recommend doing, because the programs that you see out there, like the stack system is awesome. I think it's Matthew Fitzpatrick has used it to really help his club head speed. But the stack system is really for players that they're kind of doing all the other things, like the low hanging fruit. They're already doing those things already. So things like getting a better shoulder turn, right? Getting a bigger turn, getting the arms up higher if you're swinging kind of flat. Things like loading the club properly and unloading the club, the sequencing of that. Things like using the ground to be able to create speed. A lot of players just don't do those things, but then they go and do the stack system, and they'll definitely get some improvement from the stack system, but it's not the low hanging fruit. That's the stack system and super speed golf and stuff like that. These are the things that I would do after you've kind of exhausted you've kind of capitalized on all the low hanging fruit. You've done everything. You've worked through the 20-minute shallowing fix, until you basically work through it over and over and over until you've essentially plateaued and you haven't really gained anything. At that point, that's when it'd be time to maybe work through something like that. So work through that 20-minute distance fix. And that can certainly help you. And then you can get more shaft lean, because then you can, if you have, more club head speed, right? Then you can afford to have more shaft lean. And now you're getting two things that are going to help you hit the ball farther and play better golf. There's no higher correlation to handicap than club head speed. And it's because the reason is because, if you hit the ball farther, it's just easier to play golf, right? So highly recommend it. If you want to check out our 20-minute distance fix, click the instruction tab, then click the 20-minute distance fix from there. All right. So Greg G says, how important are getting ball position, hands closer to body at impact in order to shallow club, improved angle of attack? Let me read that again. How important are getting ball position, hands closer? Oh, you mean by standing farther away versus closer? You're talking about like the distance you stand away from it? Is that what you're talking about? So, yeah. So I don't know that's going to affect angle of attack that much, as far as how close you stand to it. I suppose your angle of attack can get a little bit steeper if you stand too close to it. Right? If you stand on top of it, you're going to tend to have a little bit steeper of an angle of attack. It's not really something I've thought about. But yeah, I mean, how far you stand away from the ball does make a difference. If you stand really far away, it's going to tend to be a little bit easier to shallow out the club, because it's hard to kind of come over the top and hit a ball that's farther away from you. And you'll tend to come in a little bit more shallow angle of attack wise with that as well. But you're going to tend to early release the club. If you stand closer to it, you'll be kind of forced a lot of times to get a little bit of shaft lean. Your angle of attack will typically be steeper, but it's a little bit easier to come over the top. If I stand close like this, it's a lot easier for me to hit it from that angle. So really what I recommend doing is, as far as how far you stand away from the ball, it just as a general rule in your setup, just have a little bit of flex in the knees, basically to where the kneecaps are right over the balls of the feet. You're going to let your arms really relax, let your shoulders really, really relax, and almost let your arms hang down like they're wet noodles, right? And then what I want you to do is I want you to hinge from your waist here, right? And let your arms kind of hang straight down until they're roughly about a fist width in front of your legs. That's a really good place to be for a standard shot, right? And then for the driver, you'll be kind of in the same posture. You'll just be reaching just a little bit because the club's longer. right? So that's kind of what I would go for when you're looking at, trying to find how far you should stand away from the ball. But there are players that stand really close to it, like a John Rahm, and there are players that stand a little bit farther away from it, like Bryson DeChambeau. So you kind of have to find what works best for you. Paul C says, when I hinge my wrist at the top of the backswing, my lead wrist gets cupped, and then I flip at the bottom to make up for the open club face. How can I stop cupping? So what I'd recommend doing is, train it. So train it, do slow swings, use training aids. Training aids can be helpful. There's training aids out there that give you feedback on whether you're cupping your wrist or not. There's lots of them. There's lots of them out there to choose from. You can just go on Amazon and search wrist training aid, and you'll find a bunch of them. So really, that's what I'd recommend doing is, you just got to train it. Use a training aid that can help. If you don't want to use a training aid, then you just have to go really slow. Make sure you're using some sort of feedback mechanism to make sure that you're keeping that wrist relatively flat. And so video would be something you could use. You could look at yourself in a mirror. So I get on a mirror, look at yourself at the top of the swing. Okay, is my wrist in a good position? Make swings from there. Put in reps, getting more comfortable doing that. But like I said, there's training aids out there where it gives you instant feedback right away. I would start out with kind of pausing swings, going slow, maybe even not even hitting a golf ball. Because the reality is that if you can't do it slow, you can't do it fast, right? If you can't do it in a pausing swing, you won't be able to do it in a fluid swing. If you can't do it without the ball, then you can't do it with the ball. So I would regress things to where you can do them. That's really the key to changing anything in your swing, is to regress the swing to where you can do it. So regression would be going slower, removing the golf ball, doing pausing at key checkpoints, so on and so forth, things like that. Those would be regressions. So you would regress it to where you could do it, put reps in, get comfortable doing that. And then as you do that, you'll get better and better and better as you try to progress it toward, what a normal swing would be. It's very much, anything you learn to do, you've done this method. You probably don't even realize it, right? So typing, for example, when you first started learning how to type, you didn't just start typing, moving your hands really fast, right? You had to kind of figure out where all the letters were. So you went really slow. You regressed it to where you could do it, right? So that way you could get the result that you were looking for, right? The difference is that when we're playing golf, what we have to do is we have to figure out, or when we're working on things, what we have to do is figure out what exactly is the goal of what I'm trying to do, right? I think when people are practicing, their goal is always to hit a good shot, or hit a shot where in the direction that they want it to go, right? But if that's your goal every time, you're just going to do what comes naturally to you to make that happen, right? So what you have to do is understand that the goal is to change the wrist angle, right? Well, if the goal is that, and that's all you really care about, then none of the other things matter, right? Now, eventually that you want to be able to do that, but you have to regress things to where you can do it. So like when you're typing, the goal is to get it to happen, get it to, get the message that you want to have on the screen, right? So if you went really fast, you would fail, right? Especially like in the beginning stages, it would just be total gibberish, right? So that's why you would need to, you break it down and you go slow, and then you put in more reps. You get comfortable going a little bit faster, a little bit faster, a little bit faster, a little bit faster, right? And then eventually you get to where you don't even have to think about it. You go pretty fast and you're doing it automatically. So that's essentially what you have to work through with it. So the problem is, changing your golf swing is hard. It's a very difficult thing to do. So I would, just to go back to the typing analogy, I would equate it to learning how to type, but then you turn the key. Now you've learned how to type. Now I'm going to turn the keyboard upside down. Now you have to learn how to type again. So that's kind of what happens, right? You learned how to play golf. You learned how to to swing the club in your own way. It's not the most efficient way, so you want to change it, right? So now you kind of have to relearn how to swing the club in this way. It's not always as simple as just making a little tweak. Some things require um, you know training to make it happen. So it's like learning how to type, and now I'm going to turn the keyboard upside down, and now you have to learn how to type with the keyboard upside down. You're not going to be able to do it the exact same way. You're going to have to break it down, go slow, kind of figure, and then work through it in the same way. All right, let's keep going. We got about 45 minutes or so left here. If you're just hopping on here, I'm just waiting for a question to be asked. We ran out of questions, so if you got questions, go ahead and post them. I'm just working on some of my other, duties while you guys are coming up with questions. So keep them coming. All right. So, I'm sorry, there are a bunch of questions. My fault. I didn't scroll down. All right. So Aaron E says, "What can I do to focus on tucking in the elbow? I feel like my elbow flares and end up casting a lot and losing a lot of club head speed." Yeah. So there's one drill that I would recommend would be like a ball drill. So you can buy. There's a training aid out there that Tour Striker makes that you can purchase. I think it's like $50, but this is like a couple dollars at Target. The only difference is this doesn't have a lanyard on it, so when you drop it, it doesn't hang from your neck. It drops to the ground. So, and you might even have a ball or something like that, like a mini or like a volleyball might work, or like a youth soccer ball might work. But this is just like a kid's toy ball. I got this from the toy section at Target. So basically, what you do, it's about a 6-inch diameter ball, pretty close to that. And basically, what you do is you just put this between your elbows, right? And then you make swings, right, where you keep that ball between your elbows, right? And again, start out slow with it. Start out just with practice swings, and then build up from there. There's other training aids out there. There's ones that keep your forearms closer together. They all do kind of the same thing, but I like ones where you have to keep your arms in the position. I'm not a big fan of ones like there's one that's called like the swing shirt, where it basically forces your arms to be in that position. That could be okay if you really struggled with this drill to start out with, and then you'd want to eventually get to something like this. Because the difference is with the swing shirt is forcing you to be in the position, whereas which can be beneficial if you're really struggling with just getting in the position to begin with. But you eventually have to learn how to do it yourself, right? So it can be those kind of training aids can be beneficial to help you to understand how your body needs to move a little bit, but you still need to learn how to do it, right? So this would kind of force you to make the actual for your muscles to actually move in the way to make it happen. Because I have to keep this ball here. Whereas if I took a belt and wrapped it around my arms, right, that belt is keeping my arms there. The moment you take off the belt, you'll probably just go back to what you did before. But if you practice with this, where your arms were forced to be in that position, you're actually learning the muscles and the movements that you have to do. You have to do it, right? So that'd be a drill that I would recommend. So next question's from Troy. At what part of the swing do you start bowing the wrist? That's a good question. So first of all, you don't have to bow depending on your grip, you do not have to bow the wrist in the swing. So that's first and foremost. There may be zero part of the swing. So if you look at a player like Matthew Fitzpatrick, he has a very strong grip. So, and he doesn't bow his lead wrist at any part of the swing. So when you have a very strong grip, you don't have to bow the wrist really at all. And if you have a neutral to strong grip, you probably don't need to bow the wrist at all. If you have a neutral grip, you don't have to bow the wrist. If you have a weak, the only time it's really where you really need to bow the wrist would be if you have a very weak grip. And I say that in the sense that if you want to have a pro-like impact position, meaning you want to have shaft lean with a square face at impact, if you have a weak grip, that's where you would need to bow the wrist. So an example would be like Colin Morikawa. So if bowing the wrist is a very difficult thing for you to do, you don't have to do it. You can just have a stronger grip. So if you look here, if I have a very strong, let's say I have a Matthew Fitzpatrick type grip, right? This would be very, very strong, right? So this is like a Matthew Fitzpatrick grip. So if I have a Matthew Fitzpatrick grip, if I bowed my wrist coming into contact, I mean, look at how closed my face is, right? It's too closed. I can't get enough shaft lean to accommodate how much bow I have in my wrist. So you don't need to have it. Tiger has more of a neutral wrist, right? So, or a neutral grip, right? So he has a flat wrist at the top. He bows it a little bit as he's coming down. So at this point in the swing, there's will be a little bit of bow. And then as he comes into contact, he kind of releases some of that bow and it's more flat at contact. So that's it. But he wouldn't have to do that. He could just kind of keep it flat, right? Throughout the swing. So you don't have to. So that's first and foremost. I just want to mention that. And then as far as where you do it, there's no point in the swing where it has to first happen, right? So play around with what works best for you. So if you look at like Dustin Johnson, for example, Dustin Johnson bows his wrist pretty much right away, right? Here he is at address, and then pretty much as soon as he starts bringing that club back, he starts bowing the wrist. Works pretty well for him. I will say, if you do it early, you have to hold it. So you can do it very early and then hold the bow, right? Or you can do it later. The only place where it matters, like if you're needing to bow the wrist to square up the plate, square up the face and have shaft lean, the only place that it matters is at impact, right? So you can do it in the backswing, but you got to keep it. You have to essentially hold it. And that's what Dustin Johnson does for the most part. Dustin Johnson is a little bit unique in the sense that he really he bows his wrist a ton at the top, and then he actually releases it a little bit. So there's less bow as he comes into impact, right? John Rahm, he bows his wrist at the top, and he basically just holds that wrist. So the amount of bow that he has at the top of the swing is pretty much equal to the amount of bow that he has at impact. Colin Morikawa, same kind of thing. So you have to find what works best for you. But the earlier you do it, you're going to have to hold it, right? So play around with what works best for you if you're wanting to go that bowed wrist route. But again, if that's something that's difficult for you to do, then I would recommend using a stronger grip, because then you could just have neutral to, you can even have a little bit of a cupped wrist. Now, you can't go crazy with the cupped wrist. If you cup the wrist too much, the face can get too open, right? But you can have a little, if you look at Matthew Fitzpatrick, who has a very strong grip, he actually has some cupping in his wrist throughout the swing. So Russ says, my right shoulder stays a little high leading to overdraw. However, if I hold the right shoulder, my attack angle goes positive. How do I keep my right shoulder low, but still have, I think it means positive attack angle? It'd be hard to say without seeing your swing, but I would make sure that you're getting a proper weight shift forward. You may be hanging back a little bit. You could be early releasing, right? Those would be things that I would be looking at. You could be over shallowing. So think about the things that cause a positive angle of attack. So ball position, because when you say angle of attack, you're talking relative to the ball, right? So if my ball position is really far forward, right, it's going to be hard to have an angle of attack that's down, right? It's going to tend to be up. So ball position would be one. If I over shallow out the club, so if my club's way from the inside, too far from the inside, the club's going to tend to work up into the ball. Just like if I come over the top, I'm going to tend to hit down on it more, right? If I early release, right? So if I come in and I early release too much, right? You can see how my club bottoms out here and works up. If I have a later release, right, then my club's working more down into the ball. If I hang back, right? So let's say I have a great release, but I'm hanging back, right? I'm going to tend to hit up on it. If I slide really far forward, I'm going to tend to hit down on. So those would be the things that I'd be looking at in your swing. Is your ball position too far forward? Are you over shallowing out the club? Are you releasing the club too early? And are you not getting a good weight shift to your lead side? Those would be all the things that I'd be looking at if you're struggling with that. All right, so James B says, I'm having trouble coming over the top. What drills help me stop that? I would recommend checking out our 20-minute shallowing fix course. That's essentially the opposite. Shallowing out the club is the opposite of coming over the top, right? So work through our 20-minute shallowing fix course, and you'll fix that over the top move. To get to the 20-minute shallowing fix course, click the instruction tab, then click the 20-minute shallowing fix, and get started on those drills. So Malik W says, I've developed shanks recently. From marks on the club face, I can see that I'm hitting the ball on the heel, and then it bounces off the hosel. It's actually probably the opposite. It's hitting the hosel, then it's hitting the heel. It usually doesn't hit the heel and then the hosel. Because what happens is when you hit the ball off the hosel, the face will typically go like this. So a lot of times you can get it where it goes like that, or it could be kind of at the same time where it's kind of getting wedged in there. But it usually doesn't happen to where it hits here and then off the hosel. It's usually hosel, then off the heel. Is this from not opening my hips or more my hands coming too much towards the ball? So hard to say without seeing your swing. It's more than likely your hips going too much toward the ball. If it's between those two, that's the more likely scenario. But what I would say is if you're hitting the ball off the heel, the very first thing that I would do is try to hit the ball off the toe. Just change your intention to hitting the ball off the toe. That's the very first thing that I would do. And then, just exaggerate hitting the ball off the toe. A lot of times that just fixes it. Outside of that, the one thing I would be looking at is how your hips are moving in the swing. So if your hips are moving out toward the ball, right? So if you drew a line on my backside, actually, I'll kind of line up my backside with the vent, right? So if I line up my backside with the vent, right, and then let's say as I go up to the top, my hips move away from the edge of the vent. Or let's say at the top I'm like this, but then as I come down, my hips move away from that vent. I'm going to tend to hit the ball more off the heel because I'm pushing my hands out toward the ball a little bit. So if that's the case, also I'll go over a drill here in a second. So that'd be one thing I would look at. Another thing I would look at is excessive path. So excessive path over the top or excessive path from the inside. So if my club is excessively from the inside, then basically my hossel's kind of working out toward the golf ball. The sweet spot's working away from me, so that can bring the hosel more into play. So that could be part of it. And then if I'm excessively out to in, right? Well, a lot of times if you're out to in, the face is going to be open as well. And if that's what's happening, then this is what's coming at the ball, right? That's what's coming at the ball. We want that coming at the ball, not this, right? So if you're basically leading with the hosel, then you're going to tend to hit it off the hosel, right? If you're kind of like this. So if you imagine this is coming at the ball, that can cause hosel strike. So excessive over the top with an open face, that can also lead to that. So those would be kind of the things that I'd be looking at. So a drill that you can do to help you to get the hips moving back a little bit, and if you are kind of having an over the top move, then what I'd recommend is doing an alignment stick drill, where basically you place. This is really help you to help you shallow out the club. It's help you to stay in your posture, all things like that. I really like this drill. Basically, what you do is you take an alignment stick and you have it about 6 inches outside the ball and then about 2 feet behind the ball, right? So about 6 inches outside, then about 2 feet behind, and you'd want to put it in the ground at an angle, the same angle, the lie angle of the club, right? So if I hold this club to where it's flat, right, to where it's flush on the ground, this would be like the angle that I would want to have it. So 6 inches out, 5 2, and now I got to get underneath this, right? So if I move my hips forward, right, if I have this alignment stick here, and then I move my hips forward, my hands are going to hit that stick. So I gotta push my hips back to create space for that. If I'm coming over the top, again, I'm going to be over that stick, right? Now this doesn't fix the excessively underneath, unless you're going excessively underneath because you're standing up, right? Because a lot of times you can be here and then you stand up, that club gets way underneath. Well, if you stand up, push your hips, you're gonna hit your hands on this. So it can help with that excessively underneath. But if you're creating space and everything looks great, and then you're underneath, you're too far underneath, and that's leading to the hosel strikes, then this one won't be helpful. I would say that's more of a rarity. Most likely, your hips are moving toward the ball, instead of creating space. So Aaron E says, I can't figure out why I start out the round hitting solid. As the round goes, I start to toe the shots. So probably just because fatigue, getting worn out a little bit, or things like that. That's usually old habits, things like that. It's pretty normal for the swing to kind of deteriorate as the round goes on. Lack of focus, there's lots of things that can be there. So if you're aware of what's happening, right, you're hitting it off the toe, then what I would do is I just change your intention to hitting it off the heel. If when you get a little bit tired, you get a little bit fatigued, things like that, then and you start hitting it off the toe, then change your intention to hitting it off the heel, and it should help. All right, keep the questions coming. All right, I have scrolled down. There are no more new questions. Just making sure. So we got questions. We got 25 minutes or so left here. Keep them coming. So Andy, see, I'm confused of what part of initiates the swing. Is it the hands, the club, the shoulders, the hips, the feet? So it starts from the ground up. So pressure trail foot, that's what starts the swing. Pressure lead foot, that's what starts the downswing. So it starts in the feet, starts from the ground up. All right, so Steve G says 60 yards out with no hazards between. How do you decide between flying the ball to the pin or hitting a lower shot and skipping it up to the flag? It's really what you're most comfortable with. That's how you decide. It depends on what shot you're most comfortable with. So what shot you practice the most, what shot you're the best with. Personally, from 60 yards out, I would be hitting a wedge and basically just trying to stick it right next to the hole. Right. That's essentially what I'd be trying to do. Um, so that, if it was a front pin, if there's nothing in the way, right, then I'm going to be aggressive and I'm going to go right at it. So that'd be hitting a wedge, but that's what I'm most comfortable with. You may not be comfortable with that shot. And you may be more comfortable with, taking something that's lower lofted and landing it, in front and rolling it on. That might be the most comfortable shot for you. So how you decide is you just hit what shot works best for you, what you're most comfortable with. So Aaron E says, how do I go from the over the top swing to coming more of a shallow swing? You work through the 20-minute shallowing fix. That's what I would recommend doing. Work through the 20-minute shallowing fix. That will get you from, you work through, because the first, just to kind of talk about the process, right? The process, the first piece is to get the club face closed, right? If you're coming over the top, you're usually going to have the club face open, right? So you have to get the club face closed. Otherwise, you have no incentive to shallow out the club, right? So if I'm an over the top swinger, I actually have incentive to have the face open. And a lot of times I come over the top because I have the face open. It's a reaction to the club face being open, right? So if the face is open, right, if I come over the top, I can actually hit a functional shot that goes toward the target, right? I can hit a shot that starts to the left of the target and it slices kind of back, right? But if I have an open face, but then I also shallow out the club, well, if I make contact with the ball, it's gonna start right and it's gonna slice more to the right. So that's gonna go nowhere near the target, right? So what I have to do is I have to get that club face closed first, so that way I have incentive to swing the club from the inside. Otherwise, I have zero incentive to do so. Right. So that's number one. So that's what drill number one is from the 20-minute shallowing fix. That's the first step. Now, to do that, essentially what we're doing is we're just going to hit 10 hooks in a row. Doesn't matter where it starts. It can start left. It can start right. It can start straight. Doesn't matter where it starts. It only matters that it's hooking, right? As long as it's hooking, that's just fine for step one. And keep in mind, step one, these hooks, they're not going to be good golf shots. Most likely they're going to be hooks, right? They're going to be snap hooks. That's what we want, actually. But that's the first step. Once you get 10 hooks in a row, now we know we're good at closing the club face. Now what we want to do is we want to get the club shallowing out, right? So in order to get the club shallowing out, we got to get the ball to start to the right and hook, right? So ball starts to the right, then hooks. That's going to be step two. We got to get 10 in a row. So we start out, we're just going to kind of be swinging toward first base. If we can't do that, we're going to put a barrier in the way to force you to swing from the inside. If we can't do that, there's a wall drill where we kind of feel that club kind of dragging down the wall and then working out to the ball. So there's several, plans in there to get you to shallow out the club. Another one that I like is that stick drill that I talked about earlier, right? So putting the alignment stick in the ground at the same line angle as the club, about 6 inches outside the ball, and then 2 feet behind the ball, right? If we do that, that's going to get that club working underneath. In fact, I would maybe even put it, more in line with the ball to force that path to be even more from the inside, make it easier to get that ball to start to the right and curve to the left, right? So once we get the ball starting to the right and curving to the left, again, assuming you're right-handed, the next step is to tighten that up, right? Because again, these shots aren't going to be great shots. They're going to be hooks. These aren't shots you want to take to the course, but they're a part of the process of getting you out of the over-the-top swing and get you to start shallowing it. We actually want to overdo things, then tone them down. That's how you make fast progress. You don't make fast progress by gradually chipping away at it. You make faster progress by kind of ripping off the Band-Aid and exaggerating it, overdoing it, and then toning it down, right? And that's what drill number 3 is. Once we get 10 hooks in a row that start to the right, curve to the left, now we're ready for drill number 3, where we tighten that up, where we don't over shallow out the club. We find the right amount of shallowing. We don't over close the face. We find the right amount of face closing that we need, right? And Clay walks you through exactly what you do. You're just toning down what you're doing, and then you're putting reps in to get comfortable with that. So that's what I'd recommend doing, is working through the 20-minute shallowing fix. Lots of people have started shallowing out the club just by working through the course. So if you want to get to it, all you have to do is click the instruction tab, then click the 20-minute shallowing fix and go to the drill from there. So Reg N says, what's the difference between a soft golf ball and a hard golf ball and or cheap golf ball and an expensive golf ball? And should that concern to a high handicapper or high handicap golfer? Really, the difference is spin. That's really the main difference. Most of the golf balls really just go the same distance, whether you're using a Pro V or a Top Flight, right? They all go the same distance overall. For the most part, like it's a pretty marginal, difference there. The biggest difference between these balls is the amount of spin that you can put on them. So the softer golf balls, the ones that tour players use, that have it's a urethane cover. It's a material that is durable, but it's soft, right? And it allows you to put more spin on the ball, right? But it also allows you to get distance, not put too much spin. And a lot of these golf balls, they have layers, right? So if you hit it with a certain speed, it's only gonna get to a certain layer, and then it's going to spin a certain amount. So really, spin is it. So if you value spin, if you want spin around the greens, right, then I would pay a little bit more for that soft ball, right? Pretty much any ball a tour player uses is going to be a soft ball. I don't think there's any tour players that use Pinnacles or Top Flights or the $20 a dozen golf balls. But if you're a high handicapper, you may not notice the spin, right? You may not be making the contact that is necessary to create the spin. So it may not be something that you notice. But if you find yourself, really wanting that spin around the greens, test out some. If you're a high handicap golfer, test out a spin ball and see if it helps you. You may be a high handicap golfer that is pretty good around the greens, right, and really likes the feel of a softer golf ball around the greens, but not so great tee to green, right? There's a lot of ways that you can get your handicap high or low. So it really depends on the golfer, but test it out. If you can't really tell the difference in the spin, then that's your answer, right? You can buy just sleeves of them, right? Now, if you're looking for a relatively inexpensive, one that's not much more than kind of the cheap golf balls, that actually is a tour caliber golf ball and has a lot of spin, that you can get a lot of spin with. I'd recommend the Snell. Snell MTB Black is what I like. Now they changed the names of the golf balls a little bit. You may want to go to their website and see it's how comparable their newer balls are to what they have in the past. But MTB Black is the last one that I remember that I bought and played, and it's a great spinning golf ball, and it's $30 some a dozen, right? It's nearly half the price of what a Pro V1 dozen Pro V1s is. So and it's a little bit more than your $20 a dozen balls. Also, the Kirkland golf balls, the ones that Costco sells, you can get a lot of golf balls there. They're kind of an in between. You can get a little bit of spin in them, but they're not as hard as now they used to be. The first ones that they came out with, I believe they got sued over them. But the first ones that they came out with were a very high spinning golf balls. But the ones that they sell now aren't as spinny as the ones that they used to sell. So that you can't get quite as much spin with those, but they're still, for the money, I think it's a great golf ball as well. So if you're looking for a couple options, if money is the deciding factor, right, on your golf ball purchase, then then those would be two options that I would go with. I prefer the Snell MTB Black because it's because it's not very expensive. It's $30 some a dozen, and it has the amount of spin that I like. It has as much spin as a Pro V1 or anything like. I don't have anything against Pro V1s. If Pro V1 wanted to send me, if Titleist wanted to send me a bunch of Pro V1 golf balls, trust me, I'd play them. I think they're awesome golf balls. Same thing, TaylorMade TB5. Pretty much any golf ball a tour player is playing, it is a good golf ball. It's more about, okay, the Snells are a little bit cheaper for just the same amount of price. Now, the reason why Snell golf balls are cheaper is because they don't pay any tour players to play them, right? You might be wondering, well, if they're so great, why do tour players not play them? Well, tour players are going to play a golf ball that they're going to get paid. I don't blame them, right? If I had an option of someone to pay me to play their golf ball, if it's a good golf ball, I would definitely play it. Like, heck yeah, let's do this, right? So yeah, I would do that for sure. But they don't pay any players. They also don't sell retail, so you can't find them at Golf Galaxy. You got to go to snellgolf.com to get them. Full transparency, they do send us golf balls. They don't pay us any money, but they do send us golf balls, which is nice of them. We use them in the videos. They sent us some to test, and we liked them, and then they just kept sending them to us to use in the videos. So we're thankful for that. I've also bought some of my own. I'm also a customer, not only just like a mooch off the golf balls, but I'm also a customer. So yeah, definitely recommend those if you're looking for that. All right. So Malik W says, from my previous to shanking question, I'm definitely more of an into out swinger, usually 7 to 9 degrees according to my launch mark. Yeah, that's quite a bit. If you're swinging, you want to be probably 4 or under. So that could be lending to it a little bit. So I would try to get your path a little bit more, a little bit less from the inside. It should help a little bit. Chuck says, would placing the ball closer to or at your front foot when practicing help to develop forward lean? Would placing a ball closer to or at your front foot when practicing help develop forward lean? Not in my experience. If anything, I feel like it would be more difficult to get shaft lean, right? The farther forward your ball position is, the more difficult it would be to get shaft lean, right? Imagine if I put the ball on my back foot, it's going to be a lot easier to get shaft lean if I put it on my back foot. Now, I wouldn't necessarily want to do that because I'm going to tend to chop down on the ball, right? And I wouldn't really want to put the ball, with an iron too far off of my lead foot because I'm going to tend to chunk the ball, right? Generally, middle to just forward to the middle is a pretty good ball position for shots off the turf. Now, with a driver, you're not really going to have much shaft lean with a driver. The ball position is forward, more off of your lead foot, but you're not usually going to have much shaft lean with a driver. You're either going to have basically tour players will have 0 to a couple degrees of shaft lean. There are some tour players that have more shaft lean. So like a Dustin Johnson has quite a bit of shaft lean. I believe John Rahm, I believe, has quite a bit of shaft lean with his driver as well. But those guys hit fades, which when you hit fades, your face is open to the path, right? So that also that adds a little bit of loft when the face is open to the path. Those guys generally like to hit fades, and I would venture to guess. I don't know. Let's just see, since we don't have any questions. We can see what's in the bag. A lot of times they'll post what's in the bag. All right, so John Rahm 2023 Masters. Let's see if it shows what his driver is. Yeah, so John Rahm's driver is 11.5 degrees, right? You'd be hard pressed to find an 11.5 degree driver at Golf Galaxy, right? Or PGA Superstore. Nobody wants to buy an 11.5 degree driver. But yeah, it's 11. I wonder what Dustin Johnson uses. So, and the reason why he needs that is because he has so much shaft lean. If he played like an 8 degree driver, like Rory probably plays an 8 degree driver. If he played an 8 degree driver, he wouldn't hit the ball. It would be too low. He wouldn't hit the ball high enough. So Dustin Johnson. Let's see what his. So this is from June of 2022. His driver's 12.5 degrees. So if you have a lot of shaft lean on your driver, you're gonna need you're probably gonna need some loft to compensate for that. So you don't really need a lot of shaft lean with your driver. Like I said, most players are gonna be either no shaft leans, pretty much straight up and down, or a couple degrees, or there are some players that have a lot, but they generally are going to have higher lofted drivers. So, most of us would never dream of playing an 11.5 or 12.5 degree driver, but those guys are, right? It's because they have tons of shaft lean. They need to. All right, we got about 5 minutes left if we have any more questions. So Chuck says, I have difficulty shifting weight onto my front foot. Would placing a ball up front in practice help? Like placing a ball under your foot? Yeah, it certainly could. Yeah, so you can kind of get the feeling of, okay, I want to push into this ball. We actually have some videos, or at least a video on that on the website. I'm not sure what the, let's see if we can find it. Actually, I just may have found something. Yeah, that was fast. I just put in weight shift. But yeah, I'm going to put a video here in the chat. That's a video where I'm pretty sure Clay is talking about exactly what you're asking about, Chuck. If you want to see a video of Clay demonstrating a drill to do that, check that out. G112 is the video. All right, so Chuck says, I have type of problems. I meant to ask if I would be placing the ball closer to the front foot will help me shift my weight. I mean, not necessarily. I guess my question is, why are you asking all the questions about placing a ball under your foot, or not placing a ball under your foot, but placing the ball more forward? What do you recommend to do when your game goes south on the course? Well, basically, what I would do, I guess it's all about how you kind of react to it. So when my game goes south on the course, basically, what I try to think about is, I'm playing golf. It's a game. It's part of it. Sometimes you just don't play very well, even though you try things. But if you're like in a competition and you need to play well, you need to kind of figure it out the next day. I would look at, what's going on, with my ball flight and contact. That's what I would really focus on, because I think that when a lot of people's game goes south on the course is that they're usually thinking too internally, or they're letting what happened before, affect what they're going to do next, right? So, for example, I think Brooks Koepka, is a prime example, right? He hit a ball, sliced it into the water, right? Kept his composure, just took his drop, decided like, hey, I'm not going to make any more than bogey here. I'm just going to get it, I'm just going to execute the next shot and move on, right? You have to understand that golf, that's part of it. You're not going to go out there and you're not going to par and birdie every hole. Or if you're a high handicapper, you're going to have bad holes. So you can't let it affect you. You're just going to have bad holes. So if it's a mental thing, you have to understand that that's part of the game to have bad holes. If you look, even the best players have doubles and triples, and it happens, right? So it's all about kind of minimizing the damage. If you're, and it depends on what your knowledge is of ball flight, right? So, to get really, what I'd recommend doing is working through our ball striking masterclass, because that's going to help you to be able to understand what's happening at impact better. So that way you can make an adjustment, right? So if you're slicing everything, right, that means the face is too open, right? So you got to do something to get the club face closed, right? So paying attention to what the actual problems are, and then going from there. Chuck says, I'm looking for a practice routine to help me to finish on my left foot. Yeah, so it's about getting loaded up properly and then shifting to your lead side, right? Because if we don't load up, we don't have anything to shift, right? So, for example, if I load up on my lead side, I'm going to tend to fall away in the downswing. So I want to load up early in my trail side, and then I want to start getting momentum moving into my lead side. So a great drill would be the step drill. That's what I'd recommend doing, is the step drill. Start with your feet close together. Start swinging this club back. As you start swinging the club back, start stepping forward, right? So swing it back, then start stepping forward, and that's going to get your momentum going forward. And then when you swing through, make sure to release your trail leg. Don't let because a lot of people who don't finish their swing, they keep their trail foot on the ground. Let that trail foot come off the ground. Let your hips turn through the shot, and then come around into a full finish and hold that finish, right? If you do reps of that, you're gonna get pretty comfortable with finishing your swing. And then try to replicate that same feeling in a practice swing, right? And then try to replicate that same feeling with a ball. All right, we'll go ahead and wrap it up right there. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. We'll be back here tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you next time.